here's a typical question we'll get. How many exchanges have signed up for liquid? And, we get all sorts of variants of that question. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take you through the stages of what we mean by exchange partnerships and what that does for liquid, and kind of give you a sense of where we are on that. So I'm going to talk about them. First of all, the very first stage that we could call, I don't know if we might going to call it a partnership, but let's call it trading enabled. Okay, so this is this stage where QUOINE has set up an account and is able to trade on that exchange, is able to do all the normal things that you would expect: transfer money in, receive money out. I want to stress, by the way, receive fiat back, because sometimes with a given exchange, they may have decent liquidity, but they may have issues around the movement of fiat. So with that said, if you are just trading enabled, of which we have now, I think we're trading enabled for 17 exchanges. What does that give us for the liquid platform? So that gives us the ability to execute on any of these with the World Book SOR. But as I mentioned before, you are limited to one-to-one capital usage, right? And what's the big downside of this? Well, of course, one of them is that we're limited to this one-to-one capital usage. And although we raised an extensive amount of money in our ICO, that is still not enough to meet the demand, right? So we're definitely working on this. The other thing about this is that particularly recently, the counterparty risk is very high in these, and we take this very, very seriously. So we've done an ICO, we've raised some significant capital, we have a decent balance sheet. We view this, it's very, very important to us to understand the counterparty risk with each of these exchanges that we're dealing with. And so when we're just trading enabled, we have an issue around counterparty risk. We cannot have too much of our capital on any one exchange. So as you know, well, maybe you don't know, the largest blockchain hack, crypto hack, happened a little while back, a little over a month ago, on CoinCheck, $550 million in NEM. And if you would have looked up CoinCheck up until that point, they looked like a pretty well-run organization. Under the hood, it turned out they had a number of issues around hot wallets. And I'm not going to go into that. But what I want to say is that counterparty risk is, we can assess it to a certain extent beforehand, but there are unknowns, and you cannot completely mitigate it when you're doing this one-to-one trading enabled, right? But I will stress that we are trading enabled for a large number of exchanges, and that does allow us to execute on our vision with the liquid external order book, okay? But now we move on to the second level with exchange partnerships here. So this is where we go to the exchanges and we ask them for credit, right? And this is a very common process that most exchanges, including our own, are set up to do with institutional clients. So we will go to them, they will assess us, and we will receive some form of credit. So we already receive credit from a number of exchanges. A few of the major exchanges, I'm not going to name them, but I will tell you that, the most major exchanges here in Asia and in the US offer us credit facilities. I should mention one in Europe. But these are essentially a way to leverage our capital a small amount, okay? So what this does when we're at this stage is it gives us greater external capacity for the World Book. We're able to do more matching. But we are limited to the standard credit terms of exchanges. And I have to say, if we are competing or you're comparing us to anybody else out there, I would say that almost everybody else out there is just at stage one, and we are, or in some cases, at this sort of stage two in their partnerships, okay? But what is exciting about what we're doing, people, when they were deciding whether to invest in cash, a lot of people made the assessment that we've got a management team that has a lot of experience in finance. And this is where that matters. So some of my colleagues, Ray, Mario, Seth, particularly Seth in this area, has an amazing background. He, as some of you know, he's head of our operations and has a lot of experience with cash operations and with settlement at Goldman Sachs. So what we're doing right now is we're moving towards what we call a T+1 settlement, okay? So We've already in discussions with some exchanges, and we're already setting up the financial infrastructure. And I want to really emphasize that this is where the Liquid team differentiates itself. There is serious deep level knowledge both on the technical side and on the financial infrastructure side to make this happen. It is not easy, and we are executing on this. So I'm blown away. I'm so proud that we're doing this. I had an amazing meeting. I don't want to name the guy, a very interesting meeting. Frank, I'm just going to call him Frank, but he has a very interesting proposal around this. We're also working with a number of banks in this way to execute on T+1 settlement. So for those of you who are not involved in finance, you're like, what is T+1 settlement? What does this mean? Well, what it means is essentially QUOINE places its assets into a bank that is shared by these other exchanges. And there are a number of banks that are vying for our business and for other large exchanges' business. And what they offer in T+1 settlement is essentially you provide our exchange or some other third party some form of margining. And you base that margining on a certain amount of collateral that is locked up. And what happens is at the end of every cycle, usually once every 24 hours, all of the trades that have executed settle. There's a movement of fiat, possibly of crypto back and forth to settle. So either we have a debit or a credit in any of these given areas. And what this allows us to do is to leverage the amount of trading that we can do on any external exchange without increasing the counterparty risk. That's what I want to stress there. So we have a small amount of counterparty risk. We never completely eliminate it, but it greatly reduces it. And as we move forward with these T+1 settlement processes, this is going to really ramp up what we can do. So to give you an example, let's say that we were talking about a major exchange based in Hong Kong. I'm not going to name any names here, okay? But these guys have very good liquidity. I personally think they have a very solid API. Some people have concerns about the counterparty risk with them. So what really happens here is that until the trades settle T+1, we don't actually exchange much. We just have this third party ensure that the funds are available for us to settle at T+1. Okay. So now I want to talk about this last stage here, prime brokerage and custodial. So this is a bigger piece here, and this is the final piece in the puzzle. There's a little bit of difference here. With custodial and prime brokerage, what you really end up with is, certainly what our solution is probably going to look like, is we have a third-party entity that is going to provide custodial services. So in our case, we're looking at a trust bank. We've talked previously, I think Mike mentioned in a previous AMA, about Mitsubishi UFJ as a potential candidate for this. There may be other possibilities as well. What happens with custodial is, we'll probably use a three-party multi-sig wallet for the crypto piece of that, and the existing financial infrastructure for the fiat piece of that. So institutional clients will send their crypto to this multi-sig wallet that is managed in a three-party way with our custodial agent. And in the case of fiat, they will deposit fiat into this trust bank. So when they deposit fiat into the trust bank, what really happens is they end up with, on the blockchain, some form of tokenized fiat. And with that tokenized fiat, that allows them, with our partner exchanges, to move around fiat in a form of settlement that is in the end effectively backed by some sort of one-to-one fiat at the custodial agent. And I'm not going to go into all the details. In fact, I hope that Seth will do an AMA. He's much more competent and he's probably much more articulate and better able to explain all the procedures behind this. But from the point of view of liquid clients, what difference does that make? Well, first of all, it makes it very attractive to traditional finance. So if you talk to some of the hedge funds, or if we talk to some of the big banks, we're currently in discussions with an extremely large investment bank, one of the largest investment banks, who has shortlisted us as one of the potential exchanges that they can work with. But they need a few pieces in place. And custodial and potentially prime brokerage is something that makes it extremely attractive to them. So if we can get these final pieces in place, I think we're going to be the number one venue for traditional finance as they enter the crypto world.